Good morning, good morning. Hello, watching. So to the folks watching on the video, welcome to the season of Advent, everybody. Happy New Year. This is the first Sunday of Advent. It is the first day of Advent. It's December 1st. And in that vein and in that spirit, for our classes these 4 Sundays of Advent, we will be using this study. It's called Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. For the folks at home, as long as you have a copy of A Christmas Carol somewhere, you should find. This is nice because you can write notes in it, you can follow along, but it is not 100% needed to participate. So as you're listening to things, let us know and send us some messages with your thoughts. And for everybody else, if you haven't gotten one of these yet, there's still a few on the table down there. They cost $10 if you are able to put that money back into the offering or drop it off. That's great, and if not, no big deal. Budget these things, but that's kind of how it works.
The $10 what it's for, if it's putting up.
That would be helpful. Okay. Yes, thank you. Just put
for the calendar.
adult Bible study.
You want to go into the education.
Yeah.
Line. Okay.
Yeah. And we have an account that's kind of a pass through to money comes in, money goes back to companies.
Yeah, well, it's helpful for the calendars to know if it's supposed to go.
Yes.
Certain.
That's all right. It just puts up. I will line sort of
Yep.
designated.
All right. Now, if you got the memo last week, we were hopeful that you could have read the first. They call it stave 1. It's like a stanza because it's a Christmas carol. So Dickens wrote it in 4 stanzas or staves, like you know. But if you haven't read that, we'll do a little recap and we'll highlight a couple passages as we go. I didn't realize this, but in the introduction study, it shared that this was written shortly after Cromwell's Puritan Revolution. Oliver Cromwell was part of the effort to get rid of the royalty, and for a while, Cromwell was the leader of England, of Great Britain, and was very, very much into austerity. So very, very kind of Calvinist. John Calvin, back when he was part of his wing of the Reformation in Geneva, Switzerland, he took it a different way than Luther did. He established basically a church state in Geneva. And so all the most strictest of religious laws were made into the civil laws. And that's kind of how Cromwell ran things. People think of the Puritans as, oh, look, they have the buckles on their hats and they came at Thanksgiving, but they were not a happy bunch of people in terms of how they practiced their religion. Very strict, very moralistic. A lot of their legacy lives on in America. Some of the religious branches of the Christian tree, in terms of, you know, what morality means, and that you need to be extra pious, and that you shouldn't be dancing and drinking alcohol, and just a sort of, in some ways, joyless Christianity.
So kind of like the Quakers.
Or worse than that.
Much more strict. Because the Quakers, I think, still have some joy.
They also had a little policy.
Yeah.
In the
But
sixties,
they don't dance.
No.
in the sixties, I lived in a trailer court, and it was a big trailer court. It had its own post office. It was huge and well done. But my mom worked in the '60s, so we had this babysitter. Was one of those. Didn't cut their hair, listened to nothing but religious music, all that's great babysitter. But across the street from her was a family that was kind of a bunch of hooligans. And they had, I don't know if you've ever heard of somebody called Rusty Warren, but she was a very colorful comedian.
Okay.
And what they would do is they were just across the street from her, and she'd be playing her religious music on this little 45, and they had this big stereo system over there and crank up Rusty Warren to drown her out.
Yeah.
But so they were well liked. I guess not well liked, so wrong word. They were easy to be picked on.
Sure. Because they were so strict. Yeah. What were you going to say, Lois?
Was that written in England or States?
In England.
England, just English.
Yep. So yeah, Charles Dickens. You've read Tale of Two Cities, or what else?
Great Expectations.
Great Expectations. Very good author, and I wasn't joking a couple weeks ago when I said he was really bad at work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oliver Twist.
Oliver Twist.
You buy stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I've read a couple of his novels. They're wonderful, but they're very dense.
Victorian.
Yeah.
But Christmas Carol is short. It's not. It's a little lighter, right? There's still a lot of flowery writing.
Plus,
Roundabout,
I think everybody's seen it on TV,
Oh sure.
so they have seen it.
But
It's
that's
an
good for
easier to
1,000 times.
understand version.
Yeah.
That formal writing, like I said last week, I have some books that were written in 1888
Yeah.
about the Civil War. They were memoirs from people who was in the war.
Yeah.
And what we could say in a page, they take a whole chapter to say. So it was
Yeah.
already, it was just across the world at that time.
Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, it's a much more
High English.
florid prose. Yeah. And I heard David say before that we're catching up with the Muppet Christmas Carol. So there's lots of different versions. Most people are pretty familiar with the story. So I didn't realize, because I just everybody knows the story. I didn't realize that it was written after Cromwell's revolution ended, because you can't do Christmas trees, you can't do all these things because those are pagan, right? They took the tradition of the Christmas tree and some of the ornaments and a lot of the things that we take for granted and treasure as Christmas traditions were kind of taken, stolen, borrowed from pagan rites and rituals and Christianized. And so Cromwell was like, we're not doing any of that stuff. And so, in one place in here, it says that Christmas traditions felt more like Lent, that they were just very serious. And so, with this story, the study author says, that a Christmas Carol nearly single-handedly rejuvenated these traditions in Victoria, bringing some of the stuff back. So, before we dive in, I'm going to be on page 24. That's kind of the study part after the excerpt from Christmas Carol. Just starts with this Christmas Carol icebreaker. So the story of the Christmas Carol has become an icon within the culture of Christmas. Yet, prior to its publication in 1843, Christmas had become a solemn holiday. Here it is, closer to Good Friday than to the Christmas we celebrate today. A Christmas Carol almost single-handedly revived the joyful Yuletide celebration of Christmas. So, what are some of your favorite Christmas traditions, and do you know where they come from? If you go back far
I bought, and I can't remember now where it came from, but one of my teacher kids years ago, the pickle on the Christmas tree.
Oh, sure.
And so they have that at Bell Cottage. They have a cute little box with the story in it.
Yeah.
So I had one on my tree for years, but I had something happen to it, so I have a new pickle on my Christmas tree now.
So, where does the pickle tradition?
I can't remember. I can't remember the tradition. I have to go and read the box.
So somebody has to find the pickle, and whoever finds the pickle first gets the prize.
Is that it?
I believe so.
Okay.
Anybody know the backstory of the Christmas pickle?
I've never heard of that one.
Oh, you haven't?
Is it German?
I don't know. It
I
could
don't
be.
know.
It sounds German. But it's an ornament, and you hide it in the
Yeah,
trees.
you have to hide it. Yeah, people have to find it.
Okay.
But Bell Cottage has the pickle and it's in a box with the legend on the box. So
Okay.
you make a cute gift to give to somebody.
Well, if you think of it, read the legend
Okay,
and
I will.
let us know next.
And you also have people on whatever tree.
Multiple origin stories.
What's that?
We don't have to look at the box.
Oh, you're looking at that?
The tradition most popular in the Midwest, especially Michigan, for many different immigrants. I've never heard of it.
No, it wasn't done in my time.
I've not heard of it until a while ago.
Yeah,
It might-
there's lots of different story guys,
But I also have, like, broken a couple of them, but 3 or 4, they're real glass ball ornaments that my mother had when she started teaching in the late 30s. And, I still have them, I put them on the tree, and when I broke one a year or so ago, I felt really bad about it. And then I also have my kids, I don't know, they still do, teachers still take your kid's picture at school and put it in the frame and give it
so
for Christmas.
sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have those with my kids when they're like 3rd, 4th
Yeah.
grade.
Nice.
They hate them, so we put them on the back of the tree, but they go on the tree. And
Yeah.
my tree is very much eclectic and a lot of old stuff,
Yeah.
traditional stuff.
We have 3 trees now.
Well, I also have a Santa Claus that's made out of red pipe cleaners
Mhm.
with, it's got the original sticky face.
Nice.
And I've never, and all the antiques I've never seen, so I took it down to the guy at the antique store. And he said he'd never seen anything like it, but he was pretty sure it came from the thirties. And, it was homemade,
Mhm.
and we figured it was probably one of my mother's students.
Oh, sure.
that made it and gave it to her, so I have old stuff on my tree,
That's cool.
plus new stuff.
They all have stories. So what about that tradition of just decorating a tree? I know the trees themselves were from a pagan ritual, right? That it was
Sorry, that you along first.
yeah. And putting decorations on them, I believe that started as a German thing of just putting candles on the tree with the lights and then just kind of.
That'd be big, I don't think you could put little ones.
Well, it had to be the type of Christmas tree. You know, there's different types of pine trees or what are they called, evergreens, but there's the kind that have the really wide
Yeah.
branches. So you can do it on that because it would reach out and put it on the end without worrying about lighting the branches above it on fire.
I don't know if they still do, but we actually, when I was teaching, we could have Christmas trees, not really.
Yeah.
Whether they still do or not, but we could not put lights on, fire department did not let us, even like, they would not put.
Definitely not open flames.
Well, no, the bulbs, they wouldn't even let us put the bulbs on it.
You should have tinsel all over Christmas trees, that's illegal.
Oh,
We
yeah.
could do that as a cats feed.
You can survive,
Yeah, I thought it was illegal now.
But if you do, you're not supposed to put your tree out because it's hard for the birds if they get it.
something like that.
Something out.
Yeah, animals eat that stuff. Kills them.
Well, original tinsels were bad.
Oh, that too.
Yeah,
That's
That's
good.
why the tinsel got to be banned, I think was,
yeah, well, I remember the rule.
It's probably not just cellophane.
well, you know the legends, because they're much heavier.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they carry it.
You used to throw it at
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know where the tradition of tinsel comes from, but I know mistletoe, that's a pagan thing. Stockings, I don't know about stockings. Where that came from.
St. Nicholas.
Well, that was,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
I was
Shoes?
just say that's some.
And
Yeah,
some
the
from
Dutch
a
put
regional,
out
right?
the
Like,
shoes. Dutch do the shoes.
yeah, Dutch do the shoes and Sinterklaas, and is it Sweden? It's Saint Lucia or Lucia, and
They
they
have
do
the girl with
the
the
girl with the candle. So a lot of these are regional. That then somebody makes a Hallmark movie about it, or a book gets published, and everyone's like, "Well, I want to do that too," and it spreads. Like Elf on the Shelf, I can't see that on the shelf, but
I tell every new parent, don't do it.
I no, we know. But yeah, it's that started as a little story and a little niche thing, and that's just now basically. Oh, it's this obnoxious thing where each day you lose the elf and you mess something up in your house. It's like a leper.
Oh,
The presents on Christmas is not worldwide because in England they do Boxing Day
Yeah.
several days after.
The next thing.
And in Germany, it's earlier in December that they have a day for the presents and so
Okay.
forth.
And
So,
then yeah, some places do Three Kings, so presents don't happen until January 6th when the
I don't know
Epiphany is.
why in Germany they do it.
That's Russian
I
Orthodox.
don't know.
Could be.
I think Russian Orthodox does it on the sixth.
Yeah, and I think some
Sense, actually.
It does.
because That's where the gifts came.
yeah. I think some Hispanic cultures do just call it something about Los Reyes or Tres Reyes.
So the Greek Orthodox don't celebrate it until later either.
It's sixth.
You said the Russian.
Well, I think
The
Orthodox.
Russian
in general,
Greeks.
Eastern
Even Orthodox.
Yeah. So Christmas Carol is part of a lot of people's traditions, alongside reading "Twas the Night Before Christmas." This is one of those stories, and you watch one of the even just rereading it now, I haven't read it. It's a wonderful story. Like it just creates such a picture. I enjoy rereading this. All right, well, there's your icebreaker. Gets you in the Christmas spirit. Where do these traditions come from? Let's share an opening prayer. Stir up your power, O Lord, and come. Surround us with your presence, so that in seeing you we may discover who we truly are. For scripture, each section of this, each week, it's going to look at a biblical Scrooge. And in this case, they're going with David. There's a story in 2 Samuel chapter 12, the story of David and Bathsheba. I guess that's 11. David sees Beth. Well, first of all, the story always starts with that in the time of year when kings go to war, David wasn't home. So right there it tells you he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Draft
Yeah. And so he's up on the roof and he sees Bathsheba, this beautiful woman, taking a bath on some other roof. He's like, I must have her. But she's married, and he's like, well, complication, huh? So he basically seizes her, gets her husband assigned to the front lines of the war where he's guaranteed to die in the bloodiest fight. So commits an indirect murder. He abuses his power, takes Bathsheba for his own. She gets pregnant. The baby dies. But before the baby dies, David's good friend Nathan comes as a prophet and tells him this parable about there was a rich man who had herds and so much livestock, and his neighbor was this really poor little farmer who only had one lamb, and it was like a pet, part of the family, and would sleep within it. And a stranger comes to visit, and the custom is, the law was that you give this person shelter and lodging for the night, feed him. But the rich guy was like, I don't want to take one of my own. So he seizes the neighbor's one little lamb, kills that to feed the stranger. And David says, that's terrible. This guy should be, tell me where he is, and I'll go get him. He should be punished for doing that. And Nathan says, you are the man. You're the one who did this with what you did with Bathsheba. So Psalm 51 was what David wrote in response to that. So if you look at Psalm 51, if you have the Bible, or I'll just read the first couple lines. This is a familiar passage. It's used if you ever do the song in worship, "Create a Clean Heart." That's where it comes from. But this is a song of repentance. So we read this on page 25 here, and I'll read a little bit of the song. We certainly don't think of David's life as Scrooge-like. Usually you think of him as the kid who killed Goliath, as the king that actually did things right most of the time. That was well favored. But there is this story from Bathsheba. In that episode of his life, it was very Scrooge-like. Just holding on to something that really wasn't there. The story of David, Bathsheba, Uriah, and the prophet Nathan resonates with the same basic confrontation that is at the center of a Christmas carol. Nathan's visitation to King David to confront him with his sin is the same confrontation that Scrooge faces. Look at what you've done. We read today Marley's chains made out of cash boxes and things like that. Scrooge, you have even heavier chains around you. You just don't know. David's response is the English confession of Psalm 51. Would somebody read the first just 5 verses of Psalm 51?
I'll do that. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing, according to your great compassion. Blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight. So that you are proved right when you speak, and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me.
Yeah. And then later on, verse 10, create me a clean heart. Help me restart. Put a right spirit in me. Don't cast me away from where. Are you thinking of the songs in worship? Cast me out of the way. I don't know if anybody did that one.
I grew up in Surrey, so it was created. Spirit.
That was in our church too, in the early days.
I think I know a different melody, but the same words.
Yeah. Words would say.
So, he said, indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner when my mother conceived. But you see in David the tension between the fact that we are born in sin and the reality that we are created by God. All good. So if you flip to Psalm 139, this is also a psalm of David. You might recognize some of this too. Could somebody read verses 13 to 18?
For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you. For I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book, in your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. Now, how weighty to me are your thoughts, O God? How vast is the sum of them? I tried to count them. They are more than not the same. I come to the end. I am still with you.
Thank you. So, same guy, different parts of his life, but put these thoughts and feelings to song and songs, and at the same time, very much aware of his own sin, especially after what happened with Bathsheba and Nathan confronted him, but still understanding that God sees every bit of his life, and by extension, everybody else's too, and that he is fearfully and wonderfully made.
God created all of us so that
Yeah. So there's this tension, and even though I believe the company I ordered this from is either Presbyterian or Methodist, we get a Martin Luther quote. Theologian Martin Luther characterized this tension in the life of the redeemed child of God with the Latin phrase, simul justus et peccator, simultaneously same tense. So when we ask ourselves, who am I? We answer knowing that we are created by God, yet shackled by sin, just like Marley, Scrooge, and the ghosts hovering outside. We answer the question knowing that we are a people waiting the birth of the Savior.
I'm reading a story, well, looking at the story on let's see. This is where we know that we are created by God, so therefore I should.
That's our starting place. That's baptism, right? That's one of the reasons why Lutherans are good with baptizing infants, just to start on that note. Baptize anybody, adults, anybody, but we don't go as much for that believer's baptism that Baptists, Pentecostals, and others do, where you have to know what you're getting into, right? We want to emphasize the grace side of things, and say you are a beloved child. Nothing can separate you from that love. You didn't earn that love. Look, you're an infant. You're completely helpless and dependent. You didn't do anything.
And whatever else happens to you, you're still a child.
Exactly. I think that's so needed. That's the gospel that we need to be sharing, especially in a world that's really trying to tear people down. If you did not have a chance to read through the whole thing, there's a helpful summary on page 27. Our Christmas Carol begins with the plain and simple fact that Scrooge's business partner, Joseph Marley, was dead. But the action starts with Scrooge in his counting house office with his clerk on Christmas Eve, where he is visited by his nephew, a Christmas caroler, and two philanthropic gentlemen seeking Christmas generosity. All are turned away by Scrooge with his characteristic humbug. When you read Scrooge's mentality, he does not see everybody as a beloved child. His whole thing is commodities, right? What are you worth to me? Is Christmas worth anything to me, or are these celebrations? Is charity
Costing money.
cost me money? It's a waste of time.
And poor excuse to pick a man's spot every summer.
Yeah.
There's such good ones. At the end of the day, Scrooge goes home only to be haunted by ominous signs of the dead Marley. After locking himself into his bedroom, Scrooge is visited by Marley's ghost, bound in heavy chains. After a long conversation, Marley reveals to Scrooge that he will be visited by three spirits who will offer Scrooge the chance to escape his fate. After Marley departs through the window to join the crowd of ghosts who share the same bondage to misery and regret, Scrooge falls fast asleep on his bed. Exhausted. That's where we leave off. I do want to put in a disclaimer here. There's a whole bit with Marley. Let me find it. Marley says, This is page 19. Down towards the bottom. It is required of every man, the ghost returns, that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, travel far and wide, and if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world, oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned it happiness. So the disclaimer is that is not. There's nothing in the Bible about ghosts being required to work out their penance and have some sort of Greek mythology tragedy version of, ironically being able to observe what things are. So it's a good plot device for a short story in Victorian England, but it's not actually biblical. I know there's a lot of talk about ghosts and spirits and what does that mean. The Catholic Church had limbo and they had purgatory. What does it mean to work off your sins? Could God be using such an avenue to work on people's souls? Maybe, but it's not actually in the Bible. So I just want to make sure that's clear. This part, there's a lot of reference to Scripture, more than I realized when I read it as just for fun. But there's a lot going on here. But ghosts wandering the earth and penance, that's not. So I just want to make sure we all are on the same page. Any questions or thoughts or reflections from your reading of this before we?
The story that went to hell, and when he went back to tell his brothers what
I have that written down.
happened. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, that was a parable that Jesus told, right? We even talked about it a month or two ago. Lazarus and the rich man and Lazarus, right? Very Scrooge-like. The rich man who just walked past Lazarus every day as the dogs were licking his sores, and he just kept accumulating wealth, and Lazarus was kept on the outs. They both die. Lazarus is in heaven being tended to by the angels, and the rich man is in Hades looking across this wide chasm. And he can't have a cross. Couldn't you bring me some water? Couldn't you warn my brothers? And the line is no. They've had enough from the prophets and from the law. They know how to treat each other. And if they're not going to listen to that, they're not going to listen to the ghosts.
This is a little different. He actually comes back and talks to them. No, they're not allowed to.
Yeah. So Lazarus was basically asking if he could be the Marley, right? Or somebody could be the Marley to warn his brothers, give them a second chance. And I've actually talked about the ghost of Christmas yet to come lots and lots of times over the years when trying to explain how the prophets work, right? So they're saying, be warned, change your ways, or calamity will fall. Sometimes they just tell you, hey, calamity's coming. You missed your chance. But sometimes they function as the ghost of Christmas yet to come, or as Miley said. You could still change your ways. So yeah, that story of Lazarus and the rich man, though, definitely has a lot of parallels here. And it seems like Dickens knew his Bible, so maybe he had that back in his mind. Let's see. Yeah, I have it on page 29 here. Next to question number 9, I wrote Luke 16:19, parable of rich man and Lazarus. There you go. Pay attention. Any other thoughts or questions, just in general, before we look through these discussion questions?
2010 didn't make the story.
He comes later.
Oh, we have that.
Yep. That poor Cratchit family.
Just for fun,
Yeah.
if anybody has Amazon Prime, there's a movie called The Man Who Invented Christmas. It's the whole story about how this was written.
Really?
Yeah,
That sounds really cool. The Man Who Invented Christmas?
Yeah,
Check that out.
and it's on what?
Prime.
Amazon. What?
Seriously, bro.
If they didn't invent it, they definitely figured out how to those catalogs, man. All right. I'm on page 28 here. We don't, we'll find the questions that speak to us. So I'll just start moving through these and see which ones work. I want to do 1 and 2 together. The narrator is quick to point out that Scrooge and the long dead Marley have interchangeable personalities. They quoted, sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same. What does that say about Scrooge's own dead identity? I want to pair this with number 2 here. St. Paul points out the ultimate result of sin. The wages of sin is death. And Paul recognized that this death is not only physical but spiritual. So how does Scrooge's state of sin result in dead living? So Scrooge is alive, but also dead. So think about, Lois, you said you're reading a book about think about what is Scrooge's identity? He doesn't even care what people call him, and what does it say about him that he's kind of the living dead, but not the zombie?
He's taken that identity of Scrooge and really plays it out. He lives it out. So, and he likes being Scrooge.
Yeah, he likes it. He embraces it. He thinks other people are fools for not being like him.
Yeah, it seems like he's disconnected himself.
Yeah,
Because he lost the fun he did have in his early life.
Yeah.
So he turned his heart and say, I'll just strike out of it. It gives me great pleasure.
but he's got a smaller heart than the Grinch,
Yeah,
or at least a more closed off. Yeah, he's disconnected himself from you. We were created to be in community. He's completely. Not only are we created children of God and called good and loved, but we're created to be in this together.
he not only didn't want to be, he hated it.
Oh gosh, yeah, he hates.
They were wasting
Yeah,
energy.
what does he throw at the caroler? A key, a knife, something. He throws it at the door.
Ruler, I think,
A ruler, yeah. So he throws a ruler at the door to scare the carol away. He shuts down those folks asking for charity donations by saying that section he's talking about, there was all these like basically debtors' prisons, these factories and these places where people go work in horrible, horrible conditions, inhumane conditions. It's like, well, that they don't want to work there, that's their problem. They can get, they need money, they can go work there. No sympathy or empathy.
He made the excuse that he did contribute to those things. So therefore, I gave you the opportunity to do that. You're destroying it now.
Yeah, it's already costing me a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you hate?
Oh, his nephew? Look at that contrast.
Yeah.
Nephew who has nothing is just,
Reloading.
yeah, taking the most out of life.
And he wouldn't let Scrooge knock him down either.
Right.
He was always up.
Yeah, so put those two alongside each other. Anything else on identity? Dead living. I can throw another Latin phrase at you. And any other
Go
thoughts?
ahead.
Not
I'm gonna
that.
take it.
So one concept of sin, the Latin phrase is incurvatus se, and it means curved in on yourself, turned in on yourself. So that's one way that a lot of theologians talk about sin, is that you're turned in on yourself. Scrooge is so turned in on himself and his business and his miserliness, that other human beings are no.
He kind of took he talked about it so much like
Yeah.
and the other people, when they met, even called him Scrooge or Marley. These are kind of interchangeable.
So then Marley shows up and says, you thought what we were doing was something to be celebrated. Look what's waiting for you. We're still a mirror of each other. You just don't know what's coming.
And that's for eternity.
Yeah. Great.
That was one thing that I got out of reading this in the course, description of change.
Yeah.
So, ledgers and cash boxes,
You know, where's number 5 link yard by yard?
There was one of the ghosts outside. He had a vault, like a bank vault, hanging from his ankle. And there was this poor, wretched woman and child on a stoop that he couldn't reach. He's just like, with this big vault that he forged in life, chained to his ankle, futilely reaching out towards this woman and child for destitute. Paints the picture. It also makes me wonder, just as a person who likes to read, like, was he the first guy who came up with translucent ghosts, like 1843? No Hollywood special effects to get your imagination. All right, number 3. On page 7, would somebody like to read this paragraph at the top of page 7 that starts, "Oh, but he was a typist," and at the great.
Oh, but he was a tight fist of panic, cries Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, for which no steel ever struck out generous fire. Secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his plain nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in a grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and in his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas.
Do one more sentence.
External heat and cold had no influence on Scrooge.
Yeah.
No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chilling.
Yeah. So he's just impervious, right? So the question with number 3 is, sin turns us inward. There you go. Makes us cold. Shrivels up our personality. How does sin change how we view ourselves, how we view others, how others view us? If each person is just turned in on themselves, navel gazing, and not even in a shallow way, right? Scrooge isn't shallow. He can argue, he can debate, right? He's not full of himself. He just can't see past. I guess maybe he is full of himself, but if everybody's turned in on themselves, then why would you care about anybody else's problems? What are your thoughts on that? How does sin change how people see each other?
Well, he avoided emotional ties
Yeah.
extremely.
Well, as you mentioned, and looking ahead at the story for those who know it, what was one of the reasons why he cut off all these emotions? If you're not tied to anybody, if you're not emotionally invested in anybody, that means
Can't be hurt.
can't be hurt. Yeah, and if you hurt other people, what does it matter? So that, in that respect, sin can maybe sound kind of attractive. I don't care. Like literally, I don't care.
Cuts the stress and everything.
Yeah, I don't care about other people. I don't care what they think of me. No attachments. I can't get hurt. And if I hurt somebody else, I don't feel bad.
There are people that instead of looking at God can change that, they just keep on themselves and seeing how bad they are. See that, forgiveness is out there.
I don't think Scrooge spotted was bad.
Until he had that.
Until Marley came. I don't think he was bad. He didn't think he was bad. He thought he was doing what he was supposed to do. What he was there for is to make money and not have emotional ties. I don't think he felt that he was wrong.
No, I think he thought everybody else was stupid for not.
Yeah.
But like you said, though, we've talked about this a few weeks ago too. There's 2 sides to that coin. Sinfulness in terms of cutting yourself off from all emotions, but one of the other aspects of sin is shame. And if you're consumed by shame and guilt, you're also going to cut yourself off so you can't hurt or be hurt. But it's instead of being this sort of fortress unto yourself of, I'm right all the time, it's I'm wrong all the time. I'm worthless. I'm alone, which is I think a hell on earth. Yeah, and Scrooge was forging his chains but didn't know it. Right? He also was making him prepping himself.
Well, and he didn't do anything for himself.
Yeah. No, he didn't.
I mean, you know, like they talked about the fireplace in his house, meager as to fire. You know, he chose to live in the cold.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he wasn't even taking care of himself.
Yeah, so unlike other fables and stories where the person takes all the money and lives lavishly, he wasn't even giving himself any respect either.
He was not gluttonous, he was mindful.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and that's why I question, is he sinful or is he closed off from the world? Is there a difference?
I think one could be a symptom of the other. I think in his case, he would go with the definition of sin, not of pride or not of gluttony, but
Well, I don't know, maybe gluttony because he liked money.
but he didn't do anything.
No, it's true.
So his definitely is the concept of sin as being turned in on yourself and having no connection with no care, even himself.
Yeah.
He is as much a victim of his sin as everybody else is, which makes it an enduring and unique sin.
Actually, more so.
Yeah, because he was missing out. Number 4, what does Scrooge's conversation with his nephew reveal about Scrooge's attitude toward the world? I think we covered this.
You just said about that selfless. Why be happy? What's kind of this question? Why are you happy? Why did you get married? Because I fell in love.
Alien concept. Bottom of page 15, I love this line. As Scrooge is going up the stairs, after he sees Marley's face on the doorknob, he says, "Darkness is cheap," and Scrooge liked it. Right? Darkness is cheap. Again, you can't get hurt. Darkness is cheap. I think that one little line says but yeah, he has that contrast in the conversation with his nephew. Do you see similar attitudes in your own life or in the world or people around you? Why bother? Some people are like that. Number 5, right before Marley appears in Scrooge's bedroom, the narrator directs our attention to the fireplace, which is illustrated with characters from Scripture. The narrator points out that Marley's face came like the ancient prophet's rod. Okay, so how is Marley's vision prophetic? Talks about that. What are parallels to the prophetic confrontation we find in Scripture, like Nathan's visitation? Kind of talked about that too. I'll add one thing, and then we'll see if you all have more to add to that. There's a whole very specific thing that they shine a spotlight on. That the door was double bolted. Right? It was double locked. Scrooge did it himself. He checked afterwards, and Marley came through. And so part of, I think, what the prophet's power is whatever walls and barriers we put up to. I mean, the two things the prophets usually called Israel out on were idolatry or treating the vulnerable bad. Well, Scrooge idolized money, self-sufficiency, and he sure didn't help anybody else. So the prophet's words cut through any barriers and any self-justifications, no matter how many locks or doors. Any other thoughts on prophets?
Well, and look at David. I mean, Nathan was a prophet to David.
Yeah.
And David somehow was completely unaware of where he was with God at the time. And it's so odd because David was the man after God's heart. So, yeah. So I guess he cut himself off too.
But he went in
Because he
internally
wanted
too.
to
It's
sin
just
more
being-
than
And he got selfish.
Yeah.
But what you just said that he was, how did you say that he was, did you say he was lost? No. That he was cut off?
well, he just ignored it.
Yeah. Why are there so many things in the Bible about lost sheep? Right? It's even the best sheep can get lost. So maybe it's not, I've seen versions of A Christmas Carol that lean more into the horror aspect of ghost stories. But I don't see this as punishment story. I see this as a chance at redemption. And that's what a lot of the prophets' words are. The promise of something better or the warning not to let it go. Darren mentioned this already, that number 6, the chains that bind Marley are symbols of the sins that bound him. Link by link, So Marley asks Scrooge, or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? One other bit from page 15. Maybe it was. There we go. Oh, that. I don't know exactly what it is. There it is. Middle of page 15. The paragraph that starts, the sound resounded. The door slamming. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. So he wasn't thinking of things he'd done in the past. He was not losing sleep at night over mistakes he had made. So Marley had to come represent it for him. What spiritual chains are you bearing this Advent season? If you want to share your answer, you can. You don't have to. But if you're putting yourself into this world of Marley, what would your chains be made of? For them, it was cash boxes and ledgers, safes. What would your chains be made of? Yeah. So if you're not seeing this, Darren's holding up. Your chains would be made of what?
Emails and cell phones.
Emails. The what I've heard it called the tyranny of the urgent. Oh, it's buzzing. I need to answer it, or even the tyranny of just the pleasure of being distracted. Memes and games.
Well, when I was working full time, I was a slave to it. I had to have it to the point where the company bought me a car phone gigs, so I'd be available all the time. So it was. I never had any moment of myself. It was 24 hours a day.
Now everybody has the potential to be available all the time. There are. It sounds kind of funny, but there are younger people than me who are needing to get training on not answering things after work, or to stand up for themselves because their bosses expect them to always. And Americans are already the country that takes the least amount of vacation. Europeans, they got vacations all the time. They got holidays and everything. They know that you need breaks.
The company I worked for was Holland.
Yeah.
And they took a month off every August.
Yeah.
Everything shut down. Factory shut down. Everything shut down. They took a complete month off. And it was ironic that they didn't transfer that to the United States. They kept an American culture that way.
Oh, sure.
And in my case, I was up to 5 weeks a year. And if I got 1 week, I was lucky. And I finally started taking Monday Fridays off. And I wouldn't get paid for it, so I'd lose it all.
But you're not alone in this. A lot of folks do some version.
But it was always ironic. They'd take a month off and shut the factory down.
Yeah.
And everybody in Europe would go to a month on vacation.
Yeah.
And yet in the United States, they didn't bring that same culture.
No, they knew they didn't need to.
Yeah. Because they knew we wouldn't do it anyway. Most people would not do it.
A lot of them.
They would be, I think they would feel.
Well, there's a whole shame set up in our culture of what you're
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd feel guilty.
Sure.
Taking that time off.
We're running out of time. Number 7. Marty actually alludes to the blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode. So that's Epiphany, but Advent, Christmas, Epiphany all kind of go one into the other. What might the Christmas star be leading you to this Advent? In Marley's case, it was, man, I should have been helping all these people. There's this great line on page. Where is it? Page 19. No, we did that already. Top of page 21. Oh, captive bound in double iron, cries the phantom, not to know that ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. We have, each of us, vast means of usefulness for the needs of those around us. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunities missed. We have no shortage of ways to be useful, that's very British, but to be charitable, to show love to your neighbors, whatever phrase you want. Question. Let's see. Question 10. Marley says, I'm here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. Where do we find our hope? Sorry about my computer difficulties at the beginning. We're running out of time. But I invite you to, on page 26, it has the full text of the hymn that the caroler tried to sing, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. Read through that and see how that, Dickens never did anything without a reason. So why did he pick this Christmas carol of all others to be part of this story? It would kind of be like Jesus quoting just the first line of Psalm 22 from the cross. Dickens would expect his readers to think of the rest of it. And then on page 30, there was an activity that I thought could be a little bit fun, where we come up with our own version of Ebenezer Scrooge for ourselves. Think about the failures and struggles you have faced in the past week, things you've done and left undone, and then come up with a name for yourself, like Thaddeus Neighbor or Frowny Fur O'Brien. So come up with a name for yourself. I do think that's new homework. So come up with a name for yourself. We'll start that next week. And then there's a nice moment where you forgive each other with those names. It's silly, but it's also serious. And the other thing was just to point out, names are usually important. So who are the two names of the two main characters of this section? Jacob, Marley. Well, Jacob was a trickster, chosen by God. God could work through Jacob despite all his shenanigans he pulled. So here Marley is being worked through to help Scrooge. And Scrooge's first name is Ebenezer. So if you ever sing that one hymn, comes out one of the other verses says, Here I lay my Ebenezer. Yeah, so raise my Ebenezer. So an Ebenezer was a stack of stones built to commemorate something, so you wouldn't forget. So like when the people of Israel finally cross out of the wilderness, cross the Jordan into the promised land, they are directed to make Ebenezers, so they would always remember that God had delivered them. So Ebenezer Scrooge. How is Ebenezer Scrooge a memorial to all of us? So think about that. Closing prayer, page 31. O Lord, you have searched us and know us better than we know ourselves, and yet we give you thanks, for you are good, and your steadfast love endures forever, cleansing our heart, renewing our spirit, all through your Son, Jesus Christ. Next time, read stage 2. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.